The Senate just voted 71 to 29 to defund ICE, and 21 of those votes came from Republicans. Let me repeat that. 21 Republican senators voted with Chuck Schumer to strip funding from Trump's deportation operations. If you voted for Trump to secure the border and remove criminal illegal aliens from our country, you need to know what just happened, because this wasn't a budget vote, this was a coordinated betrayal. And I can prove it. Here's the timeline you need to see. January 22nd, the House passes a massive spending bill. 6 separate bills bundled together that fund 2/3 of the entire federal government. And buried in that package was a full funding for the Department of Homeland Security, full operational budget for ICE, everything that Tom Homan needs to execute Trump's deportation mandate. That vote, well, it was 220 to 207, and it passes. And here's the kicker. Democrats voted for it. Not all of them, but enough because the deal was already cut. Republicans gave Democrats wins on other priorities, and the Democrats gave Republicans the ICE funding. This is standard Washington horse trading, and the bill heads now to the Senate. Now watch what happens next, because this is where it gets really interesting. January 23rd, one day after the House vote, Alex Pretti gets shot in Minneapolis. He's an armed protester blocking ICE operations. Federal agents are trying to arrest criminal illegal aliens, and Pretti interferes with a loaded handgun, officers fire, and he dies. There is no doubt it's a tragedy, but it's also exactly what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey engineered. How, you may ask? Well, they blocked Tom Homan from accessing county jails. They refused to let ICE process deportations in the safety of a controlled facility. And then they forced federal agents onto the streets where confrontations became inevitable. This isn't just my speculation. Tom Homan said this himself in his press conference, and I quote, "Arrests in jails are safer than arrests in the streets." Walz and Frey knew this, but they chose the dangerous option anyway. Why? Well, because they needed the confrontation. They needed the optics of Trump's jackbooted thugs on Minneapolis streets. And then they needed a casualty to weaponize. In 24 hours after Pretti's death, they got exactly what they wanted. January 24th through the 29th, Democrat senators start walking back their support of the House bill. Chuck Schumer, he starts holding meetings, and the narrative all of a sudden begins to shift from bipartisan compromise to, now, we can't fund ICE operations that kill Americans. Never mind that the operations wouldn't have been on the streets if Minnesota officials just cooperated in the first place. Never mind that Pretti was armed and interfering with federal law enforcement. And never mind that the House bill that the Democrats voted for originally was the same bill that they're now opposing. What happened was the optics changed, so the votes changed. January 29th, Tom Homan holds his press conference, and he announces he has secured jail access. He got the Attorney General Ellis to clarify that counties can notify ICE and criminal alien release dates, so he won. Minnesota will now cooperate. ICE can do arrests safely in jails instead of on the streets. No more dangerous confrontations, and no more situations to lead to the death of Pretti. It's exactly what Homan was sent to Minnesota to accomplish. He got a total victory. Now January 30th, less than 24 hours after the Homan win, well, the Senate starts their votes. And the bill Homan just made work better, the bill will now enable safer deportation operations. The bill the Democrats voted for 8 days earlier, it gets gutted. The DHS funding gets stripped out entirely and replaced with a 2-week continuing resolution, a Band-Aid that sets up another fight February 14th. The vote was 71 to 29, which means 21 Republicans voted to strip the ICE funding. You see the pattern? The day after Tom Homan proves that Minnesota can work, the day after he secures the cooperation that makes deportation safe, and the day after he removes the excuse for street confrontations, that day the Senate defunds ICE. This is not a coincidence. This is sabotage. Because here's what terrifies the Washington establishment. If Homan succeeds in Minnesota, he breaks the template. Every other blue state governor that has been using the Minnesota recipe as their excuse, we can't cooperate with ICE. Look what happened in Minneapolis. People died. But if Homan proves them wrong, that cooperation prevents deaths, well, he shows that jail-based operations are safer than street operations. And if Minnesota becomes that model instead of the warning, then Chicago has no excuse, Denver has no excuse, and New York has no excuse. The entire progressive resistance strategy collapses, and they know it. So they had to act fast. They stripped the funding before Homan could build momentum, force another crisis before Minnesota could actually become a success story. And then they needed the Republicans to help them do it. Because if it's just Democrats blocking Trump, that's expected. But if Republicans are voting to defund ICE, that's the dysfunctional Trump administration narrative that the media wants. So let's talk about these 21 Republican senators. Some of them are the usual suspects. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Susan Collins from Maine. All of the names that you would expect from a RINO perspective. We expect them to vote with Democrats because they always do. But here, there are others on this list. Senators from red states. Senators who actually campaigned on Trump's immigration platform. Senators who promised their voters that they'd secure the border. And these senators, they just voted to defund the agency doing exactly that. You may ask why? Well, because the Senate Republican caucus is fundamentally broken, and they still think that this is normal legislative business. Budget negotiations, compromise, responsible governance, all of this mature crap that we always hear from the swamp. They don't understand that they're actually in a war. The Democrats and Chuck Schumer, they're not negotiating in good faith, and they're not looking for compromise. They're looking to use procedural warfare to destroy Trump's mandate on illegal criminal aliens. So watch how this works. Step 1, they agree to a deal. House Republicans negotiate for months, make concessions, get Democrat buy-in, and they pass the bill. While at this moment, step 2, they manufacture a crisis. They engineer a confrontation in a blue state and create dangerous conditions that lead to casualties, and weaponize those casualties in the media. Step 3, they break the deal. They use the manufactured crisis as justification, demand new concessions, and then strip the original agreement that they had agreed to. Step 4, blame Trump. They say that he's too extreme. They say his policies get people killed. Say that Republicans who support him are MAGA extremists. And you may have seen the pattern now. Step 5, repeat. This is the cycle, and it works because Senate Republicans keep falling for it. They negotiate with good faith, with people acting in bad faith. They make concessions expecting the Democrats to honor agreements. They compromise believing that the compromise will hold, and then every single time they get played because the Democrats understand something that Senate Republicans don't. This isn't about passing legislation. This is about preventing Trump from succeeding. Every bill that funds ICE is a bill that enables deportations. Every deportation is proof that Trump's agenda works. Every proof of success makes 2026 harder for the Democrats. So they can't let it succeed, even if it means breaking deals, even if it means manufacturing a crisis, even if it means shutting down the government. The shutdown itself, that's actually part of the strategy. Just last night at midnight, large portions of the federal government stopped operating. FEMA, they can't respond fully to winter storms hitting the country. Veteran services get disrupted, and federal workers, they miss their paychecks. And every single news story blames Donald Trump. Just look around, you'll see these. Trump's immigration hardline causes a shutdown. Federal workers pay the price for MAGA priorities. The government dysfunction returns under President Donald Trump. But what they're not telling you is that the Democrats broke the deal. Never mind that the Democrats manufactured the Minnesota crisis. Never mind that the 21 Republicans broke ranks and voted the Democrats. The media narrative, it's already set. It's Trump's fault. And the longer the shutdown continues, the more damage that it does. Every day is another news cycle of Trump chaos. Every federal worker story is another attack ad in a swing district. And every delayed service is another reason moderates turn against Republicans. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, they know this, and that's why they're not rushing to fix it. When the House returns on Monday, Speaker Mike Johnson has to pass the Senate version. But to do that under suspension of the rules, he needs 2/3. That means 290 votes. The Republicans have 220, so Johnson needs 70 Democrats to come over. Do you really think that Hakeem Jeffries is going to give those votes to Johnson? No way. Jeffries will demand concessions. Probably more than what Chuck Schumer already extracted, because Jeffries already said that House Democrats aren't bound by the Senate deal. They want their own pound of flesh. So Johnson, he will have to negotiate again and make more concessions and strip more enforcement authority just to end a shutdown that the Democrats caused by breaking a deal with Republican RINOs that they already compromised on. This is the doom loop. Each iteration of this loop produces more concessions. Each concession becomes the new baseline, and each crisis manufactures justification for the next surrender. It all is a circle, until ICE is so constrained, so defunded, and so operationally hamstrung that mass deportations become impossible. Not through legislation that says we're defunding ICE, but through 1,000 cuts in a continuing resolution that nobody reads. So that's the plan, and it's working because Senate Republicans keep enabling it. These 21 senators didn't just vote for a continuing resolution, they voted to validate the entire Democratic strategy. They told Democrats, your playbook works to manufacture a crisis. It helps us break deals. It helps us extract concessions. Rinse, repeat. We'll do it over and over. And they will, because in 2 weeks, they're going to do it again. February 4th deadline hits on Valentine's Day, so there's maximum media coverage right before the President's Day recess in Congress. Democrats will manufacture another crisis, probably in Chicago or Denver. Mark it. Another confrontation, another shooting, another Trump's deportations are killing people media blitz. And they'll demand even more concessions then. They're looking at amnesty language in the bill. They're looking for restrictions on where ICE can operate. And they're looking at prohibitions on sanctuary city enforcement. And guess what? At least 15 Republicans will vote for it because we can't let the government shut down again. This is the pattern, and it continues until we break it. So how do we break it? First, we need to actually understand what we're fighting against. This isn't Democrats versus Republicans. This is the Washington establishment versus the America First movement. We know this. The establishment includes Democrats. Of course, that's obvious. But it also includes Republicans, the ones who talk like Trump on the campaign trail, but vote like Schumer in Washington. The RINOs, the Chamber of Commerce Republicans, the ones who want more cheap labor more than they want border security. The ones who serve corporate donors more than they actually serve their voters. Those 21 Republican senators, they aren't making mistakes, and they're not fooled by Democrat tactics. They're doing exactly what they want to do, which is to preserve the pre-Trump status quo. What's that status quo? It's open borders, cheap imported labor, no accountability for illegal immigration, etc., etc. The only difference between them and the Democrats is that they lie about it during the campaigns. And that's actually worse, because at least Democrats are honest about wanting open borders. These RINOs pretend to support Trump, and then they sabotage him, which brings us to the solution. Primary every single one of them. Find out if your senator voted to defund ICE, and if they did, they need a primary challenger, a real America First conservative, someone who will actually vote the way that they campaign. And then this comes to you. You need to support that challenger, donate to him, volunteer your time, and vote, because nothing changes until we change the people. Donald Trump, he's doing his part. He sent Tom Homan to Minnesota, knowing that it would be hard. He's refusing to back down on the deportations despite the pressure. I mean, the biggest media campaign has been pointed directly at Trump and Homan. And Homan, he's fighting the entire establishment with Donald Trump. But Trump can't do it alone. He needs Congress that will actually support him, not one that campaigns on his coattails and then votes alongside with Chuck Schumer. The good news is we can fix this. The 2026 primaries are coming up, and a third of the Senate is up for election. If we, the people, primary the RINOs, if we elect real conservatives, if we give Trump the backup he needs, then the second half of Trump's term looks really, really different. But if we don't, if we let this slide, if we keep electing people who betray us, then Trump's entire agenda dies. What does that look like? The border stays open. Criminal illegal aliens stay here. The deportations never happen. Not because Donald Trump didn't try, not because Americans didn't vote for it, but because the entire people, the Senate, we elected to support him, backstabbed him right when it counted. These 21 Republican senators just voted to defund ICE. That same ICE that's removing the bad people, right, that do really bad things and murders from our communities. The same ICE that's executing the mandate that Trump ran on the whole time. This is the same ICE that Tom Homan just proved can work safely when local officials cooperate. But these 21 RINO senators, they chose Schumer over their voters. They chose the establishment over America First. They chose the swamp over the people who elected them. And they're counting on you to forget about it by 2026. My request is don't forget. Remember their names. Remember this vote. Remember that when Trump needed them the most, they sided with the people trying to destroy Trump's presidency. Because this vote wasn't about a budget. It was about whether Trump gets to keep his promise to you. And those 21 senators, they just voted no to what you voted for. The government shuts down again. It's done this weekend. The media is blaming Trump left and right. And the Democrats will demand more concessions, and those 21 RINOs will probably cave again. That is, unless we stop them. Primary challenges, real conservatives, and actual accountability. That's how we drain the swamp, not by hoping it gets better, but by forcing it to change. One primary at a time. So I'm Chris here at America First Alerts. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please give it a like. That helps us a lot. And if you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so. We have stories just like this every day. We'll see you in the next story.
We won!
Okay, let's go.
We won!